Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining the second session of the NBS Distinguished Speaker Series. This is a new initiative of Nanyang Business School aiming to promote cross-disciplinary discussions that can lead to new research and education opportunities. And I'm very happy to know that today's session has attracted more than 400 registrants from almost 30 countries. It's quite remarkable. So at the start, I would like to, because today's topic is about AI, I want to conduct a poll, very simple one, with just 2 questions. Can you see the questions now? Okay. Yes. So you can see that actually they are hypothetical open-ended questions. So they don't really have a right or wrong answer. So the purpose is just to gauge the, you guys' perception about the business implication of AI. And you have about 30 seconds to finish these 2 questions. And now I can introduce the moderators. I'm one of them. I'm Xin Chang from NBS. I prefer people to call me Simba, which is my nickname. I'm a professor of finance at Nanyang Business School and the associate dean for research. My research is mainly currently about green finance and CSR and also the financial implication of technology. Another moderator is my colleague at NBS, Professor Krishna Savani. He's the Provost Chair Professor of Leadership, Management, and Organization at NBS. He's one of the most prolific researchers at NTU in Singapore and also in the world. His research is mainly about culture, norms, and the decision-making. He's currently doing research about using machine learning technique to advance the science of culture. And later, Krishna will lead the Q&A session as well. I guess our audience should have finished the poll. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the speaker today, Professor David D. Kramer. David is a Provost Chair and Professor in Management and Organization at NUS Business School. He's the founder and also the director of the Center on AI Technology for Humankind at NUS. So before joining NUS, he worked at several top universities, including the University of Cambridge and Harvard University. He's a world-renowned researcher and thought leader on management and leadership issues. He's also one of the top gurus in corporate culture. So apart from a long list of articles that he has published on top academic journals, he wrote a book on Huawei a few years ago, which has been sold over 1 million copies. And his latest book, titled Leadership, you can see actually the cover page. The title is basically Leadership by Algorithm. This book has received critical acclaim from Financial Times, and it actually has reached the #1 position in the Kindle version on Amazon.com among all the leadership books. So I guess today he will share his insight in the book as well. On a personal note, I want to share with you that David is a very sporty person. He was a track and field athlete. He actually was a national long jump champion in Belgium when he was 17 years old. He jumped 7 meters. He's currently a very passionate cyclist. In his university time, I know that he played guitar, he sang in the band, he performed at different festivals. He even got a record deal with EMI for 1 single. But luckily for us, he didn't pursue those passions for a career. So he got into academia instead. So today, as a result, we are able to have him speak about triple AI, leading individuals and organization transitions in the 21st century. His talk will last about 15 minutes, followed by the Q&A. So I strongly encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A function. Can we see the poll result now before David starts? Okay, for the first question, would you like to work for a company in which most or all decisions are made by an AI algorithm? Majority of the people, 54% of the audience said no. Okay, and what do you think are more biased, human or AI? Well, 85% of people believe that humans are more biased than AI technologies. So again, this is a general perception. See whether your perception will change after David's speech. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Simba, for your introduction and for having me as the speaker. I'm very, very pleased being the second speaker in your distinguished series. So it's an honor. So I hope that I'll be able to provide some insights also relevant to your polling questions. I especially like the result of the second question, and hopefully after my talk, it will become clear why I think it's a very interesting result. But I would like to start with just outlining what I hope to achieve, because this talk, as you can see, is really about bringing AI into the context of organizations and business. So we all know AI from social media. We have gurus talking about AI. AI is everywhere, but my focus is very specifically on the use and employment of AI in organizational settings, which means you will be meeting several stakeholders, customers, employees, society. So that will have an impact on the influence that AI will have in our functioning of our organizations. And there's a few takeaway messages that I hope will be clear to you at the end of this talk. So the first one is that I would like business leaders to understand that once we bring in AI into organizations that have different stakeholders, there are limitations to AI. So the AI that you see that, for example, a Boston Dynamics shows, for example, the robots that are dancing. I think everyone probably has seen that video. This is not the reality when you are dealing with different stakeholders. You cannot afford that kind of risk that something may go wrong. So I will talk more about this. So I want to demystify AI a little bit when it comes down to AI in organizational settings. The second thing is using AI to conduct business, to execute business. Having a digital transformation project doesn't mean that your company by default then has an analytics culture. I always compare it to, you may be driving a Tesla, but that doesn't mean that you are a tech-driven person, tech-savvy person, or that you are a data-driven person. Same thing, if an organization is applying AI, it doesn't make that they have an analytics or a data-driven culture by definition. And finally, one of the biggest mistakes that I quite often see when it comes down to digital transformations and the implementation of AI platforms is that business leaders, they tend to consider it as a ticking the box exercise. So when they think they have the right kind of technology, we implement it via our strategic processes, we should have immediate returns. And technology doesn't work like that. It's not a plug and play technology revealing immediate results. It takes a while. It can take years. There's a reason why the first step that is always being suggested if you start applying AI in business, to start as a pilot test. Unfortunately, most companies today, as surveys show, have not even gone beyond the pilot stage. So scaling up AI implementation is one of the biggest challenges today. And that's why the return on investment today is very low still, okay? So these are takeaway messages that I hope that you will realize at the end of this talk. All of these things also make clear that as humans, we have a very important role to play to have AI on our side, but also to work effectively so we can perform better. Without people, AI will not work. That's already one important thing. Okay, so, but what is this reality today? So these are just a few numbers just to show that one of the reasons why we look at AI so much is because if we upscale it, it has and it will have an amazing economic impact. So PwC, for example, expects that by 2030, scaling up AI will boost the global economy by about 15.7 trillion US dollars. Other surveys also show the importance of AI as actually even executives indicating that it's even more important than the internet. The internet became publicly available in 93, 94 and changed our lives completely. Well, people in business expect that AI will have an even more profound impact, if that's even possible. But also what's important to organizations is that there's quite a lot of surveys out there that say, for example, by 2040, our workforce will be totally unrecognizable. So I'll address a little bit as well, what is the shape that our workforce will take, okay? But before we talk about this, I'm pretty sure there's certain people there in the audience already who will know what AI really is. More experts than I'm not a computer scientist, I'm a behavioral economist. So studied psychology and economics, but I'm tech savvy, as they call it. So I look at it from a behavioral point of view at the technology. But just a very quick introduction to AI for those who are not so familiar with the concept. So the simplest definition that I would come up for AI is it's a machine or a computer that acts in ways that seems intelligent. Seems intelligent. I will come back to this because it actually indicates, and I will already give away this, AI imitates us, okay? This is also going to be relevant to the second question of the polling with respect to ethics, biases, and things like that. But machines acting in ways that seem intelligent. We also make a distinction between narrow intelligence and general intelligence. At the moment, we say that AI has a sense of narrow intelligence. Narrow intelligence means it can do one task very well. So it's superior to human judgment or decision-making in one task. Humans have general sense of intelligence. We are good at a lot of things across situations. Even if it's an unknown situation, we have a certain sense of intuition that may already detect danger, threats, or opportunities, even if you don't know the situation. Computers don't have that sense of intuition. So they cannot generalize or act across situations. They're narrow. But because we call it intelligence, and by the way, this was phrased in 1956, and the people back then already regretted it after a few years having called it intelligence. But because we refer to it as intelligence, AI is different than the traditional technology at the end of the 20th century because now it seems to have learning capabilities, okay? Of course, how does it learn? Data matters. And so this is why we now talk about in the past, organizations used to consist of people. We said now today, organizations consist of data. And we want to make those data transparent because we want to use that information to feed our strategy, to put our priorities out there. So data matters. We feed, literally, it's the input into machine. Without data, artificial intelligence doesn't reveal us anything. So as long as we keep feeding it data, AI is working. And then a final concept that I would like to explain is algorithms. So I'll be referring a lot to algorithms. You also hear this on the news quite a lot. So algorithms basically are mathematical scripts, especially in organizational settings. So that's why a lot of people say most AI is statistics. So you can see that it also in research, machine learning, for example, is being used as a statistical method today. So algorithms are basically models that an AI can learn or that you can code to analyze new data sets. So it's a certain script to look at data to make those data transparent to us. And it's basically statistics for most of the time. I'll make the distinction later between unsupervised and supervised machine learning, where this will make more sense. But finally, I would like to stress that AI is actually a broad label, because I know that a lot of people confuse this. Also, in many surveys, you may see that, for example, robotic processing is seen as AI, but that's not AI. I call it usually Excel on steroids. In the back room of a company, it's churning out data, but AI is a broad label for things like machine learning, natural language processing. If you go on Google, it can read your question. If you use an app to order food, it can read what you want. It can read the menu. Siri and other phones, they can talk to you. So that's all natural language processing, is also part of artificial intelligence. Vision, if you have a self-driving car, self-driving cars need vision. They need to coordinate within the traffic, see where there are other vehicles or other obstacles, to say so. So they need that vision. Robotics, robots are also part of AI. So AI is a broader concept. But what is important is intelligence, learning abilities, and a narrow sense of intelligence, okay? So just quickly to explain how an algorithm works and why I refer to it as statistics is, I just mentioned we want to make data transparent. We want to know what is in the data that we have. So you want to analyze it by means of a certain model. So as you can see here, you get an input. For example, the input may be, you want to predict housing prices. So location matters. But the location could be a predictor of how much you have to pay, which is the output. Based on that, there's a model there, because location is a predictor of house prices. So you learn a certain mathematical script, a model we can call it, and we don't have to code it anymore, because machine learning, they can find out themselves what this model is. And once they understand this model, this logic, they can apply it to new data. So this usually happens in the training phase, and then when you have new data, they can apply this model and provide output, which are all the predictions. Okay? So you have two differences that I want to make, which is between supervised and unsupervised learning. So supervised machine learning, we learn machine basically to make distinctions, for example, between a car and not a car, for self-driving cars. Supervised learning means that we label the input. So as you can see here, we want to teach a car to recognize another car, for example. So we'll call this car, car, not car, not car. Training data, they learn, so that after a while they understand the model. Then when they see a car, they recognize it and they can avoid it. So that's supervised learning. Unsupervised would be that we just give a bunch of pictures, we don't label it, and they find out themselves. And that would be statistics then, because they'll minimize differences within a category and maximize the differences between categories, okay? So that's a little bit of a background what AI really is about. And I'm addressing machine learning here because that's the thing that we will use in organizations the most today and in the next 10, 20 years. And the form that we usually will use is supervised learning. Because you can imagine unsupervised learning, they come up with the model themselves. Then it becomes a little bit of a black box. And a black box quite often is related to distrust. So as you can already see, that would create problems if you use it towards customers, towards your employees, towards society. Some trust is needed there. Okay, so if AI is superior in certain tasks, can learn itself, there's many efficiency reasons there to accept it and to adopt it. And this is one of the main drivers I see in business today still, and which also leads to a certain fear that AI will take over our jobs, is most organizations use a cost-benefit analysis narrative when talking about AI adoption. What this means is, put very briefly and put very directly, is we use AI to cut costs. And who is a cost? Well, that's you. You're a cost. So if we have a certain sense of intelligence that can do certain tasks that you do, we're saving money. So that's the main narrative in most of the things. But this narrative has an underlying assumption. And I want to start with this assumption and use that assumption to start my story about why AI can be used for certain things, but not for other things. Because we look at, if we use the cost-cutting narrative, we actually implicitly assume that AI and humans have the same abilities. Remember when I said the intelligence part, some people in the beginning of the AI research regretted that they used the concept of intelligence for a machine. Well, a lot of the implicit assumptions today in business and society is AI and humans have the same abilities. And if that's the case, we transform, of course, our situation where we bring in AI and see, will they do your jobs or not, into a serious sum game. It becomes competitive. One loses, one wins. And this is how that framework would look like. It's a replication framework where over time, what a lot of people expect, AI will develop. They will get superpowers. Some people even believe in singularity. If that's the case, then of course AI can take over everything. And what will become is that humans will serve machine rather than machine serving humans. This is the replication framework, and it's still very dominant. So where do we get the idea of replication from? Well, we have this guy to blame a little bit. This is Rene Descartes, the French philosopher. He said, I think, therefore I am. Je pense donc je suis. So he made a distinction between the body and the mind. And he said, we outsourced our physical activities already in the Industrial Revolution. Steam engine came, cars, we don't have to do physical activities anymore. But today it's existential, because now it seems like we can even outsource our mind. So if we can outsource both our body and mind, what's left for humans? The birth of autonomous AI. And humans may not be there anymore. So there is a lot of discussion about, is AI safe for humans? And up until now, it's always been assumed that especially blue-collar workers will be replicated. But more and more discussion is emerging that also white-collar employees, workers will be affected by AI. And how will this be the case? And that's why I decided to write this book. Also because in my classes, my leadership classes, I had senior leaders walking up to me and saying, why do we still need to learn soft skills? Why is it important that we learn interpersonal orientations, dealing with people still? Machine is here, should not become a coder. I always say, like, well, if you're an executive, senior executive, you got so much experience, it's not really worthwhile to become a coder and have another career. But also, and I hope you will understand at the end of my talk, soft skills will be even more important than ever, more important than in the past. So, are we actually being serious? Is there any evidence that AI may become your boss? That AI will guide us, will lead us? Well, we all know we live in a very uncertain environment. I mean, COVID-19 has taught us nothing is predictable almost anymore, but there's the concept of VUCA, that our environments, business environments are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So we're looking for leaders today who can deal with that kind of context. Because in that context of ambiguity, there is a lot of data that can help us make things more transparent, less complex, less ambiguous. So in such situations, we're looking for leaders who can help us with this. Leadership is, if you have followers who endorse you and are willing to follow you in the direction, in your vision, then you are the leader for that situation. And in that sense, what are our needs if we look at it? Yes, we want to be more efficient. We want to optimize. We want to be able to deal with these data to get that information. And if possible, do this in a cost-cutting way. So AI seems to be fitting very well with some of the desires that we have in today's business environment. So is this the business model of tomorrow? Of course, it follows the replication idea. They will guide us. And if we look at organizational theories, there's a theory called situational leadership. It may be the case that this is actually a very simple question. Of course, if AI develops in that way and satisfies our needs, why wouldn't it be our leader? Pfeffer even said that if the situational demands dictate leadership effectiveness in the eyes of others, then what does it matter who occupies the position or how they behave? What does it matter whether it's a human or not a human? AI could be a prime candidate for leading us. And there are signs everywhere. The first sign is already and has been around for a long time. If you stop for a red light and then you move on with a green light, we're already being directed by an algorithm. But there's much more to it. I guess everyone knows this company, Netflix, during our lockdowns, and we have a mini one coming probably again. we've all contributed to the success of this company, Netflix. When we watch movies, series, there's algorithms at work who scan your preference and will feed you more of those. So you become addicted. You start using the platform more. Some of you may have even seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, which was put together by ex-tech employees from Silicon Valley who invented certain algorithms that we're all using today, who were showing that, for example, the polarization that exists in the US between Democrats and Republicans is caused by algorithms on the internet. Now, today, it seems like Democrats and Republicans live on different planets. They look at society completely different, and they have their own reality and truth. Where does this come from? Well, and they also think their perception is the right one. The other one is wrong. Well, if you start looking on the internet at certain theories, certain assumptions, beliefs, you will be fed more with these beliefs, and you will think the other perspective will be wrong. So the Social Dilemma went deeper into this. Of course, the irony is Netflix produced and showed this documentary, The Social Dilemma, but they're running exactly the same business that the Social Dilemma is criticizing. So that was, for me, an irony. But if you look at YouTube, it's the same thing. YouTube wants you to be online as long as possible. Check out as many clips as possible, because it's their business model. It generates revenue because you'll see much more commercials, and hopefully they can addict you. You stay longer, they earn more money. But there's more to it. So there are also startups who use the assumption that we talk about artificial intelligence. Again, this is intelligence. So it's modeled supposedly after the human brain. So let's look at the neural pathways, the neural imprints of successful CEOs, and try to replicate this, create highly efficient algorithms. They want to make business out of this. It's a little bit of a very limited way of looking at it, because scientists only know about 10–15% of how the human brain works. So it's a big exaggeration to say that AI is modeled after the human brain. Also, it's a computer. It works with ones and zeros. Most of us don't work like this. But business people are trying to make money out of it. We also see that algorithms are being appointed as board of directors, part of corporate governance regulation systems. And my personal favorite, this is the reflection of the Amazon work situation. I'm sure many of you will have read about it already. But if we look at closed systems like assembly lines, so Amazon has their workers on assembly lines be supervised by algorithms. And in certain circumstances, these algorithms can even fire these employees without any human intervention. So the algorithms set the stage, they set the targets, and because algorithms work consistently, they adjust the pace of work, they adjust the targets, and if you don't meet those targets in a consistent manner, they can fire you. This already feels like probably a work environment related to the first question of the poll that you don't want to be under, because if you're being treated as a robot, I mean, that's not how humans work. But Amazon is using this, and I'll come back to the company later. Also, finally, what we saw is that during COVID-19, the demand for surveillance technology has multiplied by factor 5. So this indicates, first of all, working from home, yes, but clearly most companies don't trust their employees at home because they want to monitor everything. Second of all, technology is actually being developed to guide you and to supervise you and to monitor you. Okay, so if we see that algorithms are already out there in our lives, guiding us, making us addicted to certain things, pushing us in certain directions, seems to fit already a kind of authority that has influence over our lives. But can it actually run organizations? Well, here's an example of a company who wants to achieve this. So right now in Silicon Valley, there's several big startups, really big already, working on the idea of, can we automate the running of organizations? So Stena Line is a shipping line company. The use of ferries. Of course, in the shipping industry, automation has been used for quite some time already. Basically, in the most simple form, you need a human captain when you leave a port and when you enter a port again, because someone needs to have the accountability and control for those stages. but there's a lot of automation happening there already. But this company serves countries like Netherlands, United Kingdom, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Denmark, Germany, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. And they're one of the largest ferry operators in the world. And their ambition is in the next 5 years, all the decisions, so all business decisions, this is from HR, marketing, sales, strategy, accounting, will be taken by AI. And this is the guy who has this idea in mind, Jari Virtanen. He's the Chief Transformation Officer. And he said something really interesting. He said, in the past, IT was in support of human decision-making. Today, we turn the tables. So let's take a look again at that quote, because it's an interesting one. In the past, IT was in support of human decision-making. Most of us can probably still remember this. In the 90s, early 21st century, most companies hire an IT department. Why? Well, they want the IT department to tell the board, who approves the budget, or any executive or someone in a leadership role, what software and hardware do I need? And leaders don't make those decisions. That's why you hire IT. They make the decisions. They tell us what we need to buy, and we approve the budget. Well, today things have changed. Today, data scientists, IT, they're not just there to say how you need to do your job by means of the data. You need to help them as well. So this is going to be an interesting aspect. How is leadership going to change, and what are your responsibilities going to be? So that's one thing. But the second thing here, we turn the table. So human decision-making in support of IT. Wow, that fits perfectly the pyramid that I showed you of replication. We are in support of basically technology. And that fits the ambition that everything will be automated in this company, going from who to recruit, to what kind of value we want to create, to dealing with all stakeholders. It does raise some ethical challenges already. I think you can agree with that, and we'll come back to this later. However, this may be our ambition, but I would like to reflect on this now a little bit, because we can say, okay, this is increasing. The business model of tomorrow will indeed be the robot will be your boss, to say so. Well, I would like to step back now and say, okay, if we see how does AI work? Remember, I said it seems intelligent. AI imitates human behavior, imitates our actions, our decisions. Why am I saying imitate? Well, it's thanks to this guy and not the actor Benedict Cumberbatch, but the person that he was playing in the movie The Imitation Game, which is who is the British mathematician Alan Turing. So Alan Turing, as people who have seen the movie will know, Alan Turing is actually, he created the first computer, because with that computer they could crack the codes of the Germans during World War II. By cracking the code, within 2 years, the Allies won World War II. But what is also interesting to say is that Turing went on to, of course, develop computers more, and he bumped into the question, can computers be like humans, basically? So that's why he developed the Turing test. I'm not going to go into detail in the Turing test, but what is important is that in the 50s, when he worked on those papers and the development of the test, the idea back then was, if we want to know how people think, how people feel, we have to look at their behaviors. So we didn't look into the brain as we do today. Back then, when he was developing his theories, and these theories are still the foundation of many computer scientists today, behavior was the indication. So this is why we say AI imitates human behavior. AI looks at observations, data observations about us, our behaviors, and it learns from it. So that's why we can say, like, okay, they learn from historical data, see how we've been doing things, and they learn to optimize that. But in a way, they imitate how we've been behaving. So that's why it can optimize trends based on that information. The benefit, of course, is it's much more accurate than us. It works faster. It never gets tired as long as you keep feeding that data. So in a sense, for things we already know how to do it, which are like closed systems, you could say, the routine and repetitive tasks, they're an easy target for algorithms to do. So any repetitive and routine task fits the definition of imitating a task that we can do, but AI will do better. And this is usually in closed systems. I'm saying closed systems because, like I said, we know how to do things. So that implies that we don't have changes in this, because that would mean they have to adapt. And that's a little bit more difficult. So, but AI observes and imitates. And that's a problem when it comes down to leadership. Because if I would ask you, would you like to have a leader who imitates the best practices of leaders around? I'm pretty sure that you would say, isn't that a little bit of a limited model of leadership? Someone will say, yeah, but if you go to business school, we imitate basically what the professor says us. So that's fair as well. But many of us do believe, okay, leaders should bring something additional to the table, which is authentic leadership, leading by example, we quite often say. When we want to see the norms, the values of an organization, we look at our leaders first. How do they behave? How do they think? How do they explain things? That's leading by example, and there's an authentic sense there. So we see this as very human. We don't want leaders to imitate. We want them to be real. So that brings us, when it comes down to running organizations, to an interesting question. And in that question, what does it mean to run an organization? And I see two different ways of running an organization, and both ways have different packages of tasks, to say so, because it's very clear now AI in closed systems can do tasks, repetitive routine tasks, better than humans. So what are those two ways? Because maybe we can tick boxes and then see what is possible for AI and what isn't. The first one is we manage organizations when we run organizations. And the second one is, in my view, we lead organizations when we talk about running organizations. But they require different abilities. And this is where it becomes important, where I said, and I will elaborate on this later, AI and humans don't share the same abilities. So what I said earlier, the implicit assumption of a cost-cutting strategy, which actually implies that we only want to use AI to replicate and have less costly actors doing our jobs, that implicit assumption is not really true. So if you look at management, so what do most people have a management role? I always say you can be a manager. Everyone can be a manager. Not everyone can be a leader, because a leadership position means that you can develop a management position into a position of influence. Being a manager is not by definition that you have influence. No, you stick to a protocol, certain procedures. You don't want to rock the boat too much because you follow the boxes to tick. So I call most management systems closed systems. Companies have a certain system filled with metrics, which we call KPIs or targets, and it works in a certain way. So in those closed systems, I believe AI will play a very dominant role in the next 10 to 20 years. And it becomes even more interesting if you look at how management systems, what kind of tasks do they consist of? So we know from research that about 54% of the tasks of managers are administrative tasks involving data management. And administration is everywhere. I mean, even as scholars, we're supposed to be creative the whole time. We have so much bureaucracy that it's actually impacting our research and our teaching. So bureaucracy is everywhere around. So we use a lot of metrics. So we can use AI in those systems very well as advisors, but even of managers who can simply execute in an autonomous way these routine and repetitive tasks within this closed management system. So any task, in my view, in a closed system that has metrics involved will be a target for AI. And there's no escaping this. So basically, I could also say everyone who thinks like a manager and keeps thinking like a manager, they will have a problem as a white-collar worker. And I call this the new MBA, not Masters in Business Administration, although you could say if you're being trained in administration, the bureaucracy, maybe you are being trained to think like an algorithm, but MBA stands for Management by Algorithm. And if you look at how management is usually defined in textbooks, we can see Managing is there because we seek stability over change. Leaders deal with change when there's, remember the volatility, but managers, they don't want to rock the boat too much. That's why we have this management system. It's methodological, we use metrics, we organize, we control, we bring order and stability. Again, AI is perfect in this, but it needs to be in a closed system. Because like I said, if it's in an open system, then you have to deal with changes, volatility. And as you will see, AI is not really good at that one. So, but the reality is, as I've just said, we have a lot of bureaucracy. For example, in 2019, a report was published that in the US alone, $3 trillion a year was spent on bureaucracy. It doesn't make our organizations human anymore. No, it makes it very bureaucratic, but bureaucratic meaning here, it makes it that we have to work versus certain protocols. And in that kind of system, it almost feels like we are acting like robots. We know what is expected of us and we have to tick all the boxes. So going back, so what kind of work climate does that create? If this would be the future, we run organizations by AI, remember the ferry company, how do people feel in that? Is it so easy to say, okay, they can do the task. Now, humans will be able to work under such regime or in such a culture. Well, going back to Amazon, where we had this situation, this is how people respond. People went out on the streets. So you can see this woman wearing on her shirt, saying on her shirt, we're not robots. There's several cases are being written right now about how people suffered from burnout, their well-being suffering, stress, because you have a robot in a closed system where you can't talk to, you can't negotiate with. It's very difficult to express yourself. You have to work in very consistent ways like a robot does. People cannot keep working in such a context. They go out on the streets and they suffer. It's almost like we all have that experience when we get these auto-generated emails and you can't reply to it. But you can't even reply to anyone if you don't agree with it. So it's something you just simply have to accept. That's a minor example, but these people work on it on a daily basis. And I want to show you some statistics that this is not really the kind of work culture, if you would say the MBA reality, the management by algorithm, that people are looking for. It's a little bit related to the first question that Simba asked. Well, these were 74 tech startup companies in Singapore. So these are startups basically building that technology. So my bigger goal here was to assess whether these tech startups in designing and developing the technology have a certain awareness also about what it does to humans. Because I can guarantee you for the next 30 years, the workforce will still be human, but having to work with machine. So for most of us in our careers, we still have to worry about people and how they feel. Because like I said in the beginning, if your people are demotivated, detached, your digital transformations are going to be failing. So I asked them several questions. So I asked, development of the new technology will make people less tolerant towards human failure, more tolerant, or will not make a difference? They said less tolerant, very clearly. Development of the new technology will make people see humans as less reliable, more reliable, or will not impact. 51% said less reliable. So this already shows that even the ones who are working on technology know that by implementing it in our cultures, the work culture will change, the experiences will change, and we will be confronted with maybe a work culture that doesn't work well with our human identity, who are being a human. So I asked 2039 executives in Singapore as well, their opinion. Question asked, the more jobs will be automated, the more I fear human employees will be treated like a machine, like the woman in Amazon. 59% said yes. The more machine will be used and the degree of automation increases, the more I think the pace of work will go up. 70% said yes, of course, because consistently we adapt the targets and we expect that you keep performing this. The more communication within the organization is automated, like I said, the auto-generated emails, the less I feel treated as a human. 77% of people said yes. So it's clear, simply creating organizations as a closed system where metrics do the talking, which will mean in the future AI will do the talking, yes, you can do certain tasks, get them done, but it doesn't seem to be the way to run your organization, where it's also important that you motivate your people, that you inspire them, and that you make them grow in their abilities. I always say, if you have an AI running your recruitment policy completely, what AI does is then looking at the abilities you have on that moment and see whether you fit with the requirements for the task, and you'll be hired. But there's no idea of, oh, we can also make this person grow. No, you're just being hired on what is needed. AI is not going to coach you or mentor you. It doesn't know what a human being is. It doesn't care whether you drop that tomorrow or not. It doesn't have that understanding. So we need something more when we're running, and that's leadership. So other tasks are dealing with the open system, the VUCA, the external influences we are being confronted with. Assembly line workers, they don't have to manage their emails. They don't get calls to go to a meeting. Well, in open systems, you have to deal with this. And this is also a reason why companies have always been saying we need more leaders and less managers. It's a sentiment in companies that we have too many managers and not enough leaders. So if we say leadership is really dealing with changes because it's in an open system and giving a sense of meaning to these changes so that we can come up with a strategy, a plan, a direction to follow, a vision, and then empower people to follow that vision, we seem to be in need of other abilities. So dealing with change, can AI do this? Well, like I said, AI doesn't really know what context is. What we know today is AI can play a game of chess and win even, yeah? But it doesn't understand what a game means. It doesn't understand the context, cannot go across context. The best they can do right now with a lot of use of data is 3 different games they can play, but now go beyond that. And leaders also need to connect with their people, to empower, give them the vision. Well, AI doesn't participate in interactions. It's not proactive, it's reactive, and it doesn't have the desire or ideas to connect with people on an emotional level. Meaning, well, AI has a lack of imagination. It doesn't have the empathy or emotional intelligence. So it's really difficult to understand really concerns of people and put that in context so that it becomes meaningful to them. I always say you can put computers in a sleeping mode, but that doesn't mean they can dream. That doesn't mean they can imagine things. And finally, give a sense of purpose. When you give meaning, there's a certain sense of purpose there, some values. And this is a bigger issue because AI doesn't have a moral compass. You can't say, in my view, AI is not good or bad. It still depends on who uses it. Okay, so what skills do we use? So I want to quickly, what do we need then to create that extra bit when we're running our organizations in open systems, where we can motivate, connect with people, put out a vision there, and react to changes? Well, I want to show you this video between a robot and a world champion table tennis, and look what happens. So as you saw here, the robot was well prepared. Training data were perfect. All the perfect hits, how to hit the ball, was optimized. And the human could not do anything against it. Superiority of the machine. But there was a point of time there that suddenly things changed. And when was this the case? When the ball dropped on the net and it dropped dead. Unexpected, because it's actually a wrong move. It's not optimized. It's not a perfect play of the ball. And as AI is mostly statistics, they're probabilistic. Of course, they shy away from failures. And in our organizations, we say we need agility, and agility requires that we can deal and learn from failures. But AI, in a way, because it's closed systems, it wants to control. So it shies away from failures. And here we see what the abilities of humans are. The player right away recognized, if I play suboptimal, I can beat him. And he started playing the edges of the table, and he won. So this is a very interesting example of where you see that when situations change, which organizations are confronted with, you need something more than simply the optimizing of informational trends and working with data and making those data transparent to advise what you need to do. We need a sense of common sense. We need a common sense and intuition to make sense of certain things. So we need authentic human skills. So yes, we need digital upskilling, like everyone says. But my argument is we need more human upskilling as well, because I see a lot of leaders not really being good. And I'll summarize this in the next 5 to 6 minutes. But we also need human upskilling. And those are the skills here. We need to become better at empathy and emotional intelligence, being critical in our thinking, putting things in perspective, train our imagination and creativity, and also train how to deal with moral dilemmas. Our intuition is there, and we have that general sense of intelligence. This is why I also see in Singapore that initially with the skills future set, it was all focused on data analytics. Now, suddenly in the last month and a half, soft skills are important. But it's not really being explained why. Well, in my view, the hard skills, because we work with so many metrics, they will do the majority of the tasks. But really to translate the execution of these repetitive tasks into value that is sustainable and responds to the situation at hand, we will need those human abilities, our creativity, our sense-making ones. So this is what we will need to do more. And I'm not the only one who's saying machine doesn't have common sense, and this is where humans distinguish themselves here. Common sense, it's not a fact-based undertaking, Bernie Myerson of IBM said. It's a judgment call. And just to illustrate as well, the way we look at the reality already shows, compared to a machine, that we think differently, that we have different abilities. You probably see the shade here. That's a shade of a person. As a human, you can think and infer, yeah, it's probably a human. Machine doesn't look at that picture like this. The thing that machine sees and evaluates are the numbers. So we already look completely different at reality. This means that there's a new direction in how we need to develop ourselves and our jobs. And this is called the feeling economy. So as you can see here, what are the skills that we need over time? The black line are the rational hard skills. Well, they're going to become less and less important in determining your salary in the future. The red line is the soft skills. They're going to become more important in the future. You see this, for example, in the financial industry as well, with recruitment advertisements. More and more emphasis is being put on interpersonal orientations. So the business model of the future is not one of a zero-sum game where there's competition, but it's about collaboration. And this is what I call triple AI. So with my collaborator and friend Garry Kasparov, the grandmaster in chess, and who you know, he calls himself the first knowledge worker who lost his job basically to computer after losing in 1997, but winning in 1996, he always adds. We came up with the reality, the business reality for the next 30 years is going to be triple AI. You have machine intelligence, first type of AI, but we also have people's intelligence, authentic intelligence. We bring something that machine cannot bring to the table. And it's the interplay between the two that creates the third type of AI, augmented intelligence. But like I said, today we have so much focus on cost-cutting narratives that I don't see augmentation happening that much. Just to give you an example, this is the financial industry. So if you look at what is the kind of value that AI can create, well, business value. We can create growth, which means new business model, new markets. We can improve customer experience, and we can increase our efficiency, which means by means of automation, optimization of our operation processes. In the financial industry, AI is now used to improve customer experiences, improve the service quality, chatbots, and you can see this DBS is such an example who prides themselves to be the world-leading bank when it comes down to automation and optimizing the automation operations. However, one thing that I see missing in the financial industry, and this is in a lot of other industries as well, is there's no investments being made in empowering employees. I've said it a few times, we need our people to make digital transformation happen. But using technology to empower employees, the augmented intelligence, the third type of AI that we say, I see very few investments right away. And this brings me to the quote that if you want to cut costs, you have to realize in any business that it also requires an investment on the other hand, if you want to create sustainable value and solutions. And that investment today should be in what are the jobs of the future. You can get subsidies to make people engage in digital upskilling and replace them then eventually with machine. But we need to invest in people as well. And that means you need investments at the same time when you automate to create new kind of jobs, to make sure people can be creative. I like the fact that business gurus are saying, oh, AI will liberate us so we can do more complex and creative tasks. But a report from McKinsey shows 15, or even less % of the jobs in the world have a creative element in it. We cannot all fit in there. So we have a problem right now that we don't invest in the empowerment. So how do we create that kind of culture? So this is something that I would like to say one more thing about and then conclude. To build such culture, we need a certain type of leadership. And there are two types of leaders in my book that I promote that can build the kind of culture where augmented intelligence will be possible. And this starts from the assumption that we need to realize we have data and we want to extract value from these data. But one thing we can't do is just looking at the data we have available, use that information from those transparent data once we made it transparent, and then use it to define our purpose and what we should be doing. Then we're not asking the right questions. Like I said, leaders today need to be even more clear about what is the purpose of the organization? What is our strategy? What do we want to achieve to make the right business case? And then we ask the right questions, which means we can look for the right kind of data. Then we got high quality data. If we just look at the data to define the purpose of the company, we're not working the way it should be done. And second of all, we need more inclusiveness, more collaboration. Data is in every department, but usually we underutilize data because we think data scientists will do the job. But they don't understand business that well as you do. They're not domain experts. So it needs to be more, you need an inclusive culture where different points of view are being shown and where all the data are understood by data scientists as well. So instead of finding a purpose for the data you have, find data for a purpose. So that means we need purpose-driven leaders as a first type of leadership. That means diverse, digital inquisitiveness, the why question. Why do we use technology? What do we want to achieve, the business case? And we collaborate in this. This means also that with purpose-driven leadership, communication needs to be flat. People on the front line working with the technology need to be able to update and provide feedback. So this means purpose-driven leadership, that you have visionary leadership and ethical leadership. Inclusive leadership means that we have collaborations in terms of business experts working together with data scientists in order to create algorithms, in order to look at data and collect the right kind of data so that we can answer the right kind of business questions. So we have to move from silence to interdisciplinary collaborations. Inclusive leadership means that we have trustworthy leadership, diversity-minded leadership, and humble leadership where we know we're going to fail. But can we learn from this? And what can we learn for business? What does this mean for our data science? So we need to train our human leaders better. And this also applies to our children, by the way. So as I've already told you, we don't want to train new algorithms with our kids. They need to learn the soft skills. There's no point in training kids from age 2 already and say, hey, we classify them, categorize them at age 6, at age 8, at age 12 to see whether they are talents. They need the foundation, which are our social skills, because basically we also know that AI can do what humans find difficult. AI can actually do relatively well. But what humans find so easy, our intuition, our playing, what a 1-year-old kid can do, machine can't. We call this a paradox. And this is a picture that I wanted to share with you all. I found this in a local school, inspiring imagination with creativity. So it's a first step, but if you can look at it, everyone wears the same costume, very ordered. They're playing piano, okay, it's creativity, but it seems like it's creativity within the box, whereas creativity is actually outside of the box. So we don't want to end up in a situation like this, where basically, yes, the replication model dictates, because we look at it as a ticking the box exercise with metrics, and that's what running organizations is about. Because we do only digital upskilling, we will do human de-skilling, but we need more human upskilling for our leaders today than ever. So I'm going to leave it with this. I'm going to put you, because I know also one more thing that I want to share is some of our research was applauded by and also used by the World Economic Forum. And this quote summarizes it very quickly. We can use machines for good if we're clear about what our human identity is and the value we want to create for a humane society. So this is what we do at my center on AI technology for humankind, is we elevate the power of technology for the well-being of people to make us more efficient, but we create a humane society. This implies already machine AI is not good or bad. It doesn't have intentions. It's who will use it. So if we use it, we need to be clear what is it that we want to create. Like a business needs to be clear about the business case, we need to be clear about what value and how we want to achieve that. So those are important questions to address. So I'm going to stop with this and I'm going to go to the questions. Simba, the floor is back to you.
Okay, thank you, David, for the great presentation, which I enjoy a lot. Especially I find it very visionary and inspiring. I like the concept of augmented intelligence. It should be collaborative in nature, but more importantly, is about having a collaborative effort between human and machine in service of humans. This is really a great idea. So now we have the Q&A session. So Krishna, please take the lead.
Thanks, Simba, and thanks, David, for your exceptionally insightful presentation. So the panelists have a number of questions related to ethics and biases in the case of AI. So now you mentioned earlier that one of the key goals of effective AI systems is that they think like humans. But then as we know from decades of research in psychology and economics, humans are often biased in dozens of different ways. So what can we do to prevent human biases from seeping into the AI that's becoming a big part of the world these days?
Well, it's an important question. And as you all know, I mean, companies are jumping on it. Responsible AI, Microsoft calls it. AI ethics is becoming a very prominent area. But let me start with saying one thing, because it's related to the second question also of the when we started this session. Look, AI, as I said, is not good or bad. It doesn't have intentions. It doesn't care about you as a human because it doesn't understand what a human means or human experience means. It doesn't participate in our society, so it doesn't have cultural sensitivities. So the way you have to look at AI at the moment now is it's a mirror of our behaviors. So it's also a mirror of our biases. So in a way, AI is the perfect optimizing machine for our biases because it works based on our data. It's a mirror and it optimizes our biases. So people who said like, oh, AI is not that biased. Well, it is very much because of us. because we have that responsibility over AI. And that's why I don't like responsible AI too much. And also Google, for example, now uses ethics as service. So Google is literally saying, oh, we've made our algorithms transparent, fair, explainable. So they've reduced ethics, fairness, trust to a technological competency. And they say, if something is wrong, Google will show up on your doorstep to fix it. Ethics as a service. So they've completely downgraded ethics and to a technological thing. So dehumanized it. And that's where I see a problem. Because first of all, that narrative is completely misleading, because I literally see business leaders today. There's a piece of me coming out pretty soon where I said, the more we use AI to run our organizations and make these kind of decisions, the less our leaders will become responsible. You know why? Because business leaders tell me, but that's what we have technology for, no? To be responsible. You can see what a problem we have in our business schools now. Why would we train responsible leaders? Technology is going to do it because of the narrative. So I see a shared responsibility there. So when I said it's a collaborative model, the business model, I believe ethics by means of technology is also a collaborative model. We will need our human identity more, our human intuition, our cultural sensitivities. Like, for example, Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter. AI wouldn't know this. Why? Not because it learned from historical data. It doesn't participate in our society, has no cultural sensitivities about norms and standards. A human will have to inform AI on this. But if we say, no, humans are biased, let's put them out of the equation, we're going to be only reactive. We can't anticipate. We can't be proactive. So you see, that's why I advocate also in terms of AI ethics and responsibility. It's a collaborative process. And also for business schools, we have a more important role than ever to train our leaders in soft skills, but especially in dealing with moral dilemmas and taking responsibility. It's going to be so much more important. So despite the fact that we're irrational, we are needed in this. And also, as you know, Krishna, we are very bad at evaluating ourselves because we like to see ourselves in a positive light. So we have blind spots towards our own shortcomings, but we're actually much better in evaluating others. So in that sense, we are good advisors to AI as well.
Oh, fascinating answer. So I think this ties in very well with the augmented intelligence point that you had discussed earlier. So I guess the key goal is that, it's impossible to stop human biases from translating into AI, but then we need humans to constantly check the AI for biases and correct them as when possible. And exactly. I think since AI is a collaborative effort, there are many more people involved who can participate in this correction process.
Great.
So then there are a number of other questions about what employees, managers, organizations can do in the future, so as to use AI in by actually embracing AI rather than fearing AI, that AI would take over their jobs. So on that.
So like I already said, I started my talk with saying this is the main assumption. If we're cutting costs, so we're assuming we have the same abilities, it's a zero-sum game. So the first thing I want people to realize is be aware it's not a zero-sum game because they're not comparable. So when we talk, so this is why I said governments, they're doing a good job, but they are too obsessed with digital upskilling only. Because people do get the impression, look, I need to do digital upskilling because I have to, else I'll lose my job anyway. I have no career. And at best, it's to remain status quo. I need to know. But we can't afford human de-skilling because, like I said, it's those human soft skills. Those are going to be, even if it's only 5% within 20 years, it's that 5% that's going to turn the 95% into value. So we need to create, we need to train that more. So this is why you also see a trend in education towards interdisciplinary teaching now. So now we see as well that computer scientists, they need to be taught business courses as well. They need to be taught humanities as well. Because, same thing with Boeing, the plane 2 years ago when it went down. Of course, they say, oh, we'll revisit our algorithms. The way they literally do this is just looking at the algorithm, the data they had, but they're not looking at it in a human context where a pilot who might be bored can respond really quickly. They don't even put it in that context. So they miss completely the connection of the implications for humans. And this is what I mean. Machine is there to serve humans, not the other way around. Because if we, and this is sometimes what we do, which leads then to dehumanization of the context almost. So this is interdisciplinary research and teaching, training the soft skills. But also we need more investments. Cost cutting is not only going to do it if you want to have sustainable solutions. Like I said, only 15% or less of the jobs today have creativity in it. And I know most people, let's face it, in business, when you enter most corporations, your creativity is suppressed usually. So you have a problem there. We need to start working faster on really transforming the jobs in terms of, because what I see now is AI is fragmenting our jobs, because a job is now a series of tasks. The gig economy. Oh, do this task, do this task. But if you think like this, every task will be done by a machine at the end, because for each task we have a metric. But a job is more. The job is getting the overview and seeing how does it relate to our market, to our customers, to society, to the organization as a whole. Machine doesn't do that. So we really need, and fast, those investments.
Thank you, David. I really like your discussions about basically the implication of AI for education, especially. This is really something we want to know. I find that there's another interesting question from the audience. This is from Zhi, Renmin University of China. He or she wants to know that, for example, if you think about an organization, they have managers and employees, runtime file employees. And typically, managers can actually make full use of AI and maybe help them to get richer. But for those employees, especially employees who do mechanical work, will be replaced by AI. So if this is the case, so essentially AI will enlarge inequality. So I like this question because it's related to the social impact of AI. So can you share some insight about this, whether AI will lead to inequality?
Well, I'll be very direct. The way it stands today, yes, technology is creating more inequality. And there are several reasons for this. And I think the underlying tone of my talk, I think is clear by now, is, again, AI is not bad or good. We need more responsibility on behalf of our business leaders and the right kind of investments and the ability to make a business case. Why do we need AI? Because, I mean, you work at a university. It's probably NTU is the same at NUS. I mean, we automate certain things, but I still have to sign everything manually and print out everything on paper as well. So at that point, all the automation is useless if this is your goal, because the only goal is to promote control. That's not the story that they say, hey, Simba, now you have to do less. You don't have to deal with it at all. No, now you have to figuring out how the system works and still do the same kind of job. So it is not helping us because there's no vision behind it. So we need leaders really to work more with this because they shy away from responsibility. Like I said, if Google says, hey, ethics is only technology, responsibility is all technology. Hey, I just call Google if it doesn't work. I mean, as a leader, I don't do anything anymore. So if we have this culture, inequality keeps growing. I mean, COVID-19 already showed that between rich and poor, it's increasing as well, because countries that have access to a lot of information versus don't, they suffer, have less information, they suffer more during COVID-19, and COVID-19 has amplified this. So yes, the inequality is there because we will not be able to use technology to such an extent, depending on whether you're wealthy or not wealthy. But also there's another issue, data democracy. There is no data democracy. So we bring in AI into organizations, like I said, now saying organizations consist of people. No, organizations consist of data, the era of big data. So now here we are, everyone has data. So why don't you use AI? What I see in Singapore is most SMEs, small, medium enterprise, they have so many difficulties because first of all, they have to comply, of course, with government regulations, what they need to achieve, and then try to create their own value vision. They can't deliver. like most companies in the world, it's the big five, they have all the data. I referred to the fact that AI cannot generalize across context. So they can play one game very well, like chess. But the AI that plays chess very well, it can't play the Chinese board game Go. It can't shift. So now there was a paper published in Nature that showed that they now have AI that could learn up to 3 different games. But in order to test that and to achieve that result, you needed so much data that only the big tech companies could provide those data to run the experiment. So there is no data democracy if you look at the monopolies of the tech companies. So that's the same pattern in economics and between wealthy and less wealthy nations. It's the same thing.
Yeah, in other words, I think the technology indeed will lead to inequality, but it's actually human beings' responsibility to address that.
Like
so maybe human can actually design AI to address inequality, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, AI
is augmented AI, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, we will need it, but also, like I said, the data democracy is going to be extremely important. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that simply data skills and programming skills are, not the most important skills that the managers of future need to have. But do you think managers need to have some familiarity with coding and data science so that they can actually understand the AI and maybe even help identify problems with the AI rather than entirely relying on?
I mean, you need to be tech savvy. That's the minimum. But when I said to senior leaders, so these are senior leaders, they were literally wondering, that's why I wrote the book as well, partly, do I need to become a coder? Well, you see, then we've been communicating the wrong message. Yes, you need to understand. So like I did in this talk very quickly, you explain up into a very basic level. Okay, this is basically what it is. You need to understand that as a bare minimum. And why? Because, like I said, the role as a leader in the AI era has changed as well. In the 90s, IT told you which software and hardware to buy, like I said. Now, I see most senior leaders, because they're not trained in tech, in terms of understanding tech very well, they treat their data scientists in the same way as they treated the IT department. So that means they expect data scientists to tell them, what did our data tell us? This is what the data tell us. So then these insights will probably define our strategy. And this is what I meant earlier. No, you can't have data define your purpose. You define the purpose so we can ask the right kind of questions. And when we ask the right kind of questions, we can see whether we have the right kind of data. And if we don't, we have to collect new data. So leaders or tech savvy will improve data quality. They don't understand because they're not doing it. So you don't need to be that coder, but you need to be tech savvy enough to make clear, what business are you in? What service are you going to provide? What kind of treatment are you going to provide to your stakeholders? What does that mean? So those questions are important. And those need to be communicated throughout the organization, and feedback, that's why I said flat communication needs to be delivered. And inclusiveness in terms of bringing data scientists to the core of the organization, that they're not in silos, because now they work in silos the whole time, because we still have that old idea of, they tell us what the data tell us, and then that's what we do in our organization. I mean, you can see the irony here. So of course, they need to be trained. Knowing a little bit of coding, fine. We call this algorithmic management. So you know this, but you still need to be, like I told my leaders, you need to be good at being a leader at your business. And at lower levels, of course, the domain experts and the data scientists, they talk together so that data scientists understand these are the business rules. These are the rules of the game. If I implement an algorithm, is it not going to be biased? Because they understand the rules of the game now. But they don't know this when they start. So if you don't have a work culture where there's no inclusiveness and no diversity in thinking like this, and no inclusion, you keep the silo. So that's why I'm stressing the human upskilling, and your leadership qualities are more important than ever. Today, boards worldwide in companies, when I talk to boards, they're scared of AI. because they don't understand it. But they're the ones who have to approve the budgets. So of course we have a problem. My center revealed last year, in Asia, 90% of companies say they adopt AI. Less than 15% of these companies have a return on investment that is positive. That's a huge discrepancy because they can't make a business case, meaning, why do you need technology? And where are you going to put it in the operational process? What does this mean to your management? New kind of jobs you need? What does it mean for your customers? They can't even answer these questions.
And great point. At least at a minimum, managers need to know what kind of data we have, what kind of data we need to make the right decisions.
They need to be experts on asking the right questions and making sure they can talk to these data scientists.
So I guess that's why many banks recently now have chief data officers.
Yes,
whose job.
But banks is a great example, if I may. So there's a lot of banks, and one thing I don't like is they're saying, we're not a bank, we're a tech company with a banking license. That's the most stupid thing you can do because you've already lost all your business. First of all, tech companies, they do this as a hobby finance. And they're so much better than a bank in terms of technical abilities. So they blow you away if you think like this. Second of all, me as a customer, I have a problem with this because I'm thinking, what have you been doing in the past with my money? If you're a tech company with just a banking license, clearly you're not proud to be a banker. And clearly banking is not, you don't need any knowledge even because it's simply technology. Like ethics is technology, now banking is technology. Well, that's a mistake. And I see this with banks. Again, the leadership is lacking there because the leadership says these things. What I want from these leaders is, no, the vision of our bank is they all have certain values they want to create. Well, we use technology to optimize these values for you as a customer. There's no point in saying you're a tech company because you've lost. Look, Bill Gates, with his foundation, he also helps with his tech background in third-tier countries to get people cheap accounts. Why? Because he has much better technology than any bank to drive down the costs. But Bill Gates is not a banker, and nor does he care about the banking. The only thing he cares about is that they have a cheap account. So if you want to say as a bank, oh, I'm the same as Bill Gates, go ahead. But I'm sorry, I don't want to be part of that.
Great. There's a question maybe quite related to the current situation, COVID. So hopefully it won't happen, but if social distancing become more or less permanent fixture, including in work and also in school for education, would this will actually help support AI in becoming more or less important in the workplace? Basically the implication of COVID.
About COVID for education and business.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me start with ask you all, when the pandemic outbreak happened, early 2020, where was the AI community? Nowhere. They weren't saying anything. Why not? We had no data. No one knew COVID-19. So we had to resort back to our statistical methods and of people and making our usual irrational mistakes. Look at the overconfidence in Europe than the leaders. They waited too long. All these things happened. So this already shows you again the limitations of AI in itself. But of course, we're going to use AI. I mean, robots, robots don't get sick. So they can deliver food. And we saw this in China happening already very quickly. Yeah, same thing in hospitals. Basic functions can be done easily. So of course, that will happen. In terms of business, look, working from home, we're social beings, as you all know. So we will have to give something in terms of like the hybrid form is going to be, people will have to see other people, and not only in terms of Zoom meetings, because that fatigues our brain. Our brain is not very attuned to it. This may have changed in 2-3 generations, but our generations now, we can't adjust to this in our lifetimes. So yes, we will use AI. I mean, it has helped us, the technology as well. The fact that we're doing this now is already thanks to technology as well, and we've already adjusted to some extent to it. But I do see some challenges. So for example, with respect to education, if you allow me to say something about that, I see that, like I said, the administration, educators have a lot of administration, as I already mentioned. If we can use this in a more effective way, AI can help us there a lot. really liberate us. It can help us also in terms of the teaching, that certain things are taken care of. We can focus on more certain topics. Like technology can also help us to record certain lectures already, so that when we engage with our students, we can focus more deeply on certain aspects. You have assistants, like for example, master degrees. When students have questions about it, they can already go to a chatbot service who will provide the basic questions. These are all things that are helping out as well, and businesses can do the same. But I also see a few threats there, especially related to the social being that we are. So you may have heard of this or not, but there's a lot of research going on now on affective AI, affect, emotions in AI. And yeah, they like facial recognition, they want AI to recognize emotions. And AI, they're reasonably good at it, but they're not perfect at all. I mean, they're not that good at it actually, but they're already being used by certain nations and companies who don't care too much about humanity, I would say, but they're already being used. So now in Hong Kong, during classes, these are teenagers. In the camera, this AI was already included to assess the emotional expressions of the students. So they have to keep their camera on. It's not like our students who all want to shut down the camera. The camera has to be on, and the AI analyzes the emotion. Fine. But what I don't like is what they're doing with it. So these are companies who sell this AI. They recognize your emotion, and they argue that once we know the emotion, we can infer the motivation of the student and even the personality of the student. So they used this in Hong Kong, and students who they thought were not motivated enough in the classroom were sent messages simply based on that. Here we're crossing ethical boundaries because, Krishna, as you know, as a psychologist as well, look, I don't believe that from the emotion we can infer the motivation and personality. That is completely untrue, not scientifically validated, but money's being made already from it. First thing. So this is, to me, it's a step too far, because we wouldn't even do this in face-to-face, Yeah. Also, the other thing is the AI platforms for education. Look, what COVID-19 happened. What did we do? Like here, we resorted to Zoom, but Zoom is, it's free, given by a company. It's actually very sad that all these are top-notch universities. We don't even have our own systems. We say we're professionals, but look, we're all using Zoom. Yeah? Why am I saying this? Because again, like in the financial industry, you have the tech companies who move into the education industry. And they have so much better technology development. Their AI platforms, we cannot compete. So what I predict is in the next 4 to 5 years, COVID-19 will create a lot of opportunities now because we can do our job from everywhere because of this technology. So you will see that there's a lot of people now. So let's say you were a retailer and you had local business. Now suddenly that local business person can go globally. This will go on for 4 to 5 years. You know what? Because then the big tech companies, they will join forces with, for example, the Ivy Leagues. Brand meets brand, they will go together and the whole market will change completely. Now we think it's unlimited opportunities. Within 5 years, we're gonna have problems if we're not prepared for these things either. So, and the final thing is, I'm a little bit afraid of the technology addiction. Our brains work, like I said already with our children, they need to learn the soft skills very early on because a human brain needs social input to grow. Neuroscience has shown this. By replacing it by technology, we will be creating MBA, management by algorithm, in people's mind. And you've seen what the consequences are there. Yes, we will have a predictable society, but is it the humane society that we want? That's another question.
Yeah. I think we don't have much time left. Maybe we only have time for one more question. Krishna, maybe you select a question from the list. Any?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So do you think in the near future, or maybe near or not so near future, it might be possible to develop AIs that actually has soft skills, and maybe both on the positive side, like creativity, but also on the negative side, like jealousy and competition?
Well, you know what? On the surface, yes. Like I said, with emotions and AI. So what you see is that Because look, all these questions have a certain moral dimension to it. Yeah, is it going to be possible? That's one question. But is it going to be something that we need as humans and that we are clear about that we want this? That's another question. So yes, like I said, AI can already recognize emotions. They will get better at this the more data we give them, and the more, for example, behavioral sciences progresses and can identify behavioral laws. And what will happen is, for example, in marketing, service delivery, AI will actually be able, I think pretty soon, but the way it will not be used right away, but in the lab, at least in the next 5 to 10 years in the lab, maybe 15, 20 years, it will be used in business. They will be able to communicate with you and really talk in a way with emotional expressions and kind of tones. And the speech will be so advanced that basically as a human, your intuitive system, so to call your neuroscience, your the imprint, will recognize it and will actually reciprocate. But that's what I call service level emotions, because this is the big thing. AI doesn't have common sense. AI doesn't have a consciousness. AI is not a participant in terms of experiencing humanity. So it will be able to manipulate you, but it's not authentic. It's not deeper level, because AI will not understand what the emotion means to you and how it makes you feel. It will make you business, but that's why I said this is the moral question. To what extent do you want it to be authentic or not? That's why with the triple AI, I called it second type of AI, is authentic sense of intelligence. But this is something that we have to decide on. Because, and also I see at one point, look, you may lose loyalty of certain customers because they feel that, I mean, for a very long, still for the next 20, 30 years, most of these relationships will be mechanistic. You know why? Because natural language processing is running against its limits because of this lack of common sense. So if I, as an AI, would talk to you and I'm really good at manipulating service level emotions already, and Krishna, you feel like, wow, this AI understands me. Well, it's a problem because they don't understand the meaning of wording, for example. So just to give you a very quick example. So this is a sentence used in research where they said, a man went to a restaurant. He ordered a steak. He left a big tip. So if I would ask you, what did the man eat? Did the man eat a steak? You say yes. A computer will not say that. You know why? Because eating a steak was not mentioned in the sentence. Because I just said he ordered a steak, he left a big tip. You implicitly know right away he ate a steak, because a human would not give a tip for not eating the steak. But a computer right now will say, we didn't eat. Because he doesn't understand, he cannot read in between the lines. So the same thing with these emotions. It will not be able to respond in between line responses. And that will be, as long as we don't solve the issue of common sense and that they reach a general level of intelligence, which will be at least 50 years away, it will never be authentic.
I think this is the perfect point to end this session at. So, Simba?
Yeah, I wish we could have you a little longer, David, but this webinar has to come to an end. It's really thought-provoking, and then it's really exciting to think about how to, for researchers, how to design technologies to improve humanity.
Yeah.
So again, I want to recommend your book to our audience. It's a very fascinating book to me, Leadership by Algorithm. I think it's a must read for people who want to understand, how in this AI era companies have to run, and then what kind of leadership we need. There are still, I think, many unanswered questions. Many of them are great ones. I like questions about, for example, about sustainability, how AI will address sustainability issues. But I guess we don't have time to cover these questions. But again, if you are interested in knowing the answers, I noticed actually you have chapters in your book talking about the issues about sustainability as well. So people can find the answers in David's book. If you cannot find answer in the book, please maybe contact David directly for answers. So thank all the audience for participation and the great questions that inspired these discussions. And also I want to thank the communication team, Sean, Leela, Jay, Florence, Georgian, people who work behind the scene to make this session run so smoothly and successfully. And then of course, finally, I want to thank David again for his generosity and dedication to academics. I'm sure this will actually inspire a lot of discussions and maybe research collaborations. Maybe researcher and data scientists can work together and to better harness the technology to serve people. And then can I go back to the previous slide? This is actually David's recent picture. I mentioned at the start that he was a long jumper, a national champion. But that's actually when he was younger than now. Now he's still jumping. So as a token of appreciation for his time and dedication to the research community in Singapore, so on behalf of the school, I will present David some gift. It's just a sport jersey. Like I will basically cover the logo and also a hat. This has nothing to do with AI, certainly, but I know this cannot really help you jump 7 meters again. But hopefully this will help you jump a few inches more in the future. So I'll pass the gift you later. I look forward to future collaboration with you and also new aspects in school. So finally, I will ask the audience, invite audience to visit our website, NBS Knowledge Lab. It's our thought leadership platform. You have all the information you need. And if you want to know more information about our future webinars, you should visit our website. And do connect with us on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and join us in future sessions of this distinguished speaker series. In the future, we will talk about other issues such as infectious diseases, robotics, and other topics. Okay, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you again. Krishna, thank you. And also thank you, David. Hope to see you soon.
See you soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.